now we have our, I would say, final speaking. It's unbelievably how quickly this day passed. So, but we have been speaking about a lot of subjects and all about concerning boating, sailing industry. And now we have a representative from the European boating industry. So Philip Easthill, Secretary General. And Philip will introduce us shortly to the EU agenda that we have on the market. European boating industry has been working and representing the different views of different organizations in the market, and of course experience that they have in helping us to cooperate is something really very, very valuable. And so it will be really interesting to hear from Philip how we can contribute better to already this cooperation, and to see how we can really speak louder about all these subjects that we've been touching upon here today. Philip, I can see you, and I'm very happy that you had this possibility to join us today. So, Philip, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Julia, and thank you for having me at this fantastic conference, and congratulations for what you have already done in the last couple of hours and the last couple of years even. I would love to share my presentation, but it didn't seem to work just now. I guess your technical team also has my presentation. Could they share it directly? Would that be possible?
Yeah, just a couple of seconds. We are solving. I see the busy eyes, so we are working on it. Meanwhile, before your presentation, Philip, can I just, quickly, what would you say, very spontaneous, your reaction about the Baltic region? What is the first that comes into your mind about the Baltic Sea region, the coastline here?
The Baltic Sea region, well, I'm half German, and the German side of my family comes from Hamburg, and has a very strong sailing background, and that's how I personally started sailing. So the Baltic Sea region is where I personally learned to sail, so that's my very personal reflection of how I got into sailing as a kid, and then eventually into this current position. So very positive reflections, I would say.
Wonderful, wonderful. This is what we all wanted to hear, that it's a despite the fact that it might be some cold, but it's still a great sailing destination. That will be definitely one of our messages for them. Okay, I see that everything is on. Philip, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me, and very sorry to not be with you in the wonderful city of Riga today, but I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to connect in person in future. If we could just go to the next slide, I'll just show you a bit what I want to talk about in the next couple of minutes. I'll try and not be too long and not bore you, but I did hear in the last couple of presentations also the question, okay, the connection between boating, marinas, and the wider boating industry. So I'll talk about that a bit in the next few minutes. So explain a bit the boating industry in Europe, the current challenges and opportunities that we see at the European level, then a bit our European agenda and the sort of key policy areas and topics that we work on, and then two very specific examples, what we are doing in terms of our advocacy work here in Brussels, and that's the declaration of the European Parliament on nautical tourism, and then a project that we're doing in relation to environmental sustainability, and then leave you with just a couple of key messages which hopefully are interesting for your conference and the project. If we could go to the next slide. So maybe very briefly, who is EBI? We are European boating industry. We represent the European recreational and nautical tourism industry in Europe. Our mission is to advance and represent a sustainable boating and nautical tourism industry made in Europe. And this made in Europe aspect is very important for us. I will come back to that in a couple of minutes. Our members are national associations of the boating industry, and we also have some individual sustaining members. But national associations, that means they really represent the entire market. In many countries, they represent everything from manufacturers to services to marinas. In other countries, that's a bit separate. But also in the Baltic Sea region, we already have quite a few members, in the case of Finland, Germany, Poland, and most recently Lithuania. What do we do? Our main work, and that's why we are based in Brussels, is that we do advocacy. So our work is to represent the industry towards the EU institutions to make sure they are aware of what our industry needs and how our industry is set up basically on the key pieces of legislation. We also do quite a lot of work on regulatory intelligence, market intelligence, moving the industry forward, but also on events, for example. That's a big part of our work. If we could go to the next slide, on that slide, I will show you a bit who we really represent. And I think it's important to see this industry as an ecosystem. And we have an ecosystem where we have manufacturers, so like boat builders, but also builders of the large yachts, PWCs, smaller water sports equipment, everything. We have engine builders, we have equipment manufacturers. On the services and tourism side, we have refit yards, maintenance yards, we have boat installs, we have dealers and porters, we have charter boats, charter companies, rental companies of water sports equipment, of small boats, large boats, everything. And we also have the infrastructure side, which I understand is the main focus of the conference today. Marinas, yacht harbors, I learned the word guest harbors today, just another synonym for what we're talking about here, leisure ports. In terms of what this means at the European level, we have around about 6 million boats in European waters. 80% of those are really small boats below 8 meters. And certainly in the Baltic Sea region, I know this is very much the main part of the market. At the European level, we have an estimate that there's around about 36 million regular boaters. Then coming to the industry side, we have 32,000 companies, and really over 95% of those companies are small and medium-sized enterprises, family businesses, really small micro companies. In terms of employees, there's around about 280,000 direct employees, but many more indirect employees that benefit from the industry across the supply chain and the many destinations and regions where we are represented. On the marina side, there's around about 6,000 inland and coastal marinas in Europe. And I think we have to be this is our key message, we are a strong sector in Europe. We are strong internationally. We're very competitive internationally, both on the tourism side, boating side. People love to come to Europe, to the Mediterranean, to the Baltic Sea, to many parts of Europe, from Europe, but also from abroad, to go boating and to do nautical tourism. But we're also very strong on the manufacturing side. So what I said about made in Europe is very important. The boats that we use in Europe are really still, a lot of them are built in Europe. We have a very strong supply chain. Of course, we import as well, but European manufacturing in this industry is still very strong, especially if we compare to large shipbuilding, to tankers, to cruise ships and so on. A lot of that production has moved abroad into Asia, but in our industry, we can be proud of it. It is still produced in Europe to a large extent. If we could go to the next slide. Challenges and opportunities for the industry. I wanted to start out with this. What are we seeing at European level? In general, and you will have seen this as well, the consumer trends in the last 2 years were very positive. We are seeing more new demographics, more younger people coming into the market, a lot of interest in boating, also partially as a result of all the lockdowns and the COVID blues. People wanted to go out and be safe. So that's something quite positive. We're also seeing a decrease in seasonality. People are going boating also in the side season, not in the middle of summer, but maybe different in the Baltic Sea, but certainly in the Mediterranean, that's something that we're seeing as well. Something that we're seeing as well across Europe is that with so many new boats coming into the market, there is a lack of marina space. We need more marina space. We need it better optimized. And obviously, marinas are infrastructure. Marinas need to be adapted to the next decades. They need to be modernized, made more digital, and made more green as well, of course. That's in relation to energy needs, but also alternative fuel infrastructure and all of these important priorities. There is an expectation on our industry, as for any industry, to move towards more sustainability, sustainable propulsion, and overall a lower environmental impact from society, from governments, and from consumers. That's really an expectation that we have to meet in the next decade and even years. Overall, what we're seeing as well is that there's more of a, I would call a service-based approach to boating. People want to, on a weekend, go to their boat, have it ready to go out. So there's a lot of demand for this type of having the boat ready services. And at the same time, obviously, the digital revolution is not stopping at our shores, but also coming onto the boats and into the marinas. And I know you had a presentation about this already earlier today, so I don't have to go into detail on that. If we could go to the next slide. This is really the core of what I want to talk about. This is what is our European agenda, our European maritime agenda, as the presentation says. The key topics that we want to work on and that we are working on. I'll just grab a few of these just to illustrate a bit. So the European Green Deal and circular economy, those are big topics for us. So the questions here is how do we deal with end-of-life boats? How do we make sure that the materials that we use in boat building can also be dismantled and recycled at the end of life to make sure they don't get abandoned, that they are used in an efficient way, and that we have a circular economy approach. We also have still many issues in terms of qualifications, both private boater qualifications and commercial skipper qualifications. How can they be recognized between the countries so that we can just move across borders as freely as we can do with a car, with a driving license on a boat and rent a boat in a country and move it to another country? Those are our key topics. Also from an industry side, of course, the topics of technical issues like the Recreational Craft Directive, which deals with emissions and so on, is very important and something that we're looking at. How can we reduce emissions? What is the future looking like in terms of new propulsion technology, electric engines, hybrid technology, hydrogen, new fuels? Those are all the big topics that we are working on, both in terms of moving the industry forward towards these sustainability targets, but also in terms of educating policymakers about how to do this in the most efficient way through regulation, through funding, through other areas of support. And then we always have some hot topics that are on our agenda, specific topics that we deal with as well. But this is really the scope of our topics that we are working on at European level. And on the next slides, I'll just give a few, two illustrations of how we're doing this. So here is something just before the summer. We organized an event together with a group in the European Parliament, which has over 100 members of the European Parliament from almost all EU countries, from all political groups, from left to right. This group had a meeting, an event together with us on the topic of nautical tourism. So for 2.5, 3 hours, we talked about the key issues that affect our industry, nautical tourism, at European level. And the result of this event, and some of you may have been there, is to have this declaration on developing common rules for truly European nautical tourism. So this was already co-signed by a number of members of the European Parliament. And now, after the political summer break that is over about next week, here in Brussels, we will get more members of the European Parliament to sign on to this, to support it, and then hopefully to implement it together with the other EU institutions in the coming years. So on the next slide, you see what has been included in this declaration, and we're very, very proud that this is becoming an official document circulated in the European Parliament. We have 5 main issues that are included in this declaration. The first one being the topic of boater mobility, the recognition of private boater licenses, the international certificate of competence that is, but also to the second point here, developing a legal framework for the qualifications of skippers to be recognized across borders, so that someone who has a skipper, a commercial skipper license from one country can also skipper boats in another country or on the boat of another country. And this is something very important. We're seeing a growth in charter tourism. We have a lot of new people coming into boating for the first time, younger people. They want to go on a boat, but they don't really know how to, so they want to hire a boat with a skipper on board to help them understand how this boating thing all works. So they need to have appropriate guidance, also for safety reasons. So we need to make sure that skippers can move between countries and across borders. The third point here, advancing the green transition and development of marinas. As I said, we need more marina space, but also we need to make sure we optimize the use of existing marinas, and that we advance them in terms of sustainability. There's a lot of opportunities here. They are really a cornerstone of a green transition for our industry. They are important for sustainable propulsion. We cannot have electric boats if the marinas are not prepared appropriately. We cannot have, let's say in 10, 15 years, hydrogen boats if the marinas are not prepared. All of these issues, really, marinas are the cornerstone of what we're talking about. But also, their own energy needs can be certainly optimized in terms of the green transition as well. And then the fourth point here in this declaration, the coordination of national plans for the development of recreational boating, both inland and across, for example, different sea basins like the Baltic Sea. And I know this is what you want to do already, and also with your follow-on project that I just heard about. That's something very important. We need to work together between countries so that we can have common aims and really do that all together. And the fifth point here on value-added tax, we do have issues that VAT rates for on-land tourism activities like hotels and campsite are reduced, but for marinas and charter activities, they are not reduced, even though they are essentially the same activity just being carried out on water. So we need to make sure that those VAT rates are aligned so that we are on a level playing field and that our industry is not put at a disadvantage. So these are topics that that have been included in this declaration, and we are sure that this will give them a strong boost to be implemented in the coming years. If we could go to the next slide, there's another example of what we are doing as European boating industry. We are part of a European project called Environaut, which is funded by the European Union by Erasmus+. And this project will develop the first ever position of environmental officer. So this will be an online course with a test at the end, an additional qualification, further education for everyone working in the nautical tourism industry, working in a marina, in a charter company, in a maintenance company, for skipper services. All of these types of companies and employees can get this qualification. This is an idea to react to this demand from industry, from consumers, from society, from regulators, to move towards more sustainability in tourism, in nautical tourism, so that there will be ideally one person per company, per marina, for example, who would be the sustainability officer, in this case, environmental officer, trained by this online course that we are now developing. We're developing it now, so there's still a lot of work for us to do. We're planning to have it done by early 2024. You can help us to develop this qualification, make it as useful as possible. There's a lot being carried out in the next couple of years, but very immediately now we have an online questionnaire that you can access through this QR code, which you should be able to scan, or you will also receive a link afterwards in this presentation that can be shared afterwards as well. So it would really be helpful for us if you could fill out this questionnaire and support us with this. So if we go now to the final slide, these are just the key messages that I want to leave you with. There is an opportunity to grow jobs and prosperity for regions, for governments in peripheral regions, so away from the traditional economic heartlands, through having this link between marinas and nautical tourism, which generate jobs for restaurants, for everything around them and in themselves, but also for manufacturing in Europe. And I think that's something that governments find highly attractive, to have manufacturing back in Europe and stay in Europe. And this made in Europe aspect is something that we are very strongly pushing for. And then something that I haven't talked about in the last few minutes, but what we're seeing is not just new people, but also really very different people coming into boating. So we're seeing a democratization of boating, which is much more accessible, easier accessible, more cheaper accessible, and nautical tourism in general. And this can really support something that I think destinations are really interested in, to move away from mass tourism towards more low impact tourism. So this is something where our industry and boating and nautical tourism can make a real benefit. And then thirdly, sustainability and digitalization, of course, will be the driving force for everything that we do and our industry has to do in the next years. That's undoubtedly the case. And then the last point, European, and by European, I mean at European level, but also regional cooperation is really crucial to develop boating, to make it more attractive. That's what makes boating attractive. If you can move far between countries, between different cultural destinations, between different cuisines even, that's what makes boating attractive. So that's something that we would highly encourage. But also in terms of our work at EBI, I already said we have some Baltic countries already involved in EBI. We'd love to have all Baltic countries involved in EBI, but also the outcomes of your project and the future projects that you are now doing, as I heard, will be very important for our work, and we'd love to bring it also into our European maritime agenda and into the maritime agenda of the European Union. So with that, on the last slide, it just says thank you. So thank you very much for your attention. You have here our website, social media, but also my contact details. I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions, but I'd love to also answer some questions now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Philip.